The mansion in Polanco, Mexico City, was wrapped in a heavy, unnatural silence. The kind of silence that follows a tragedy. The funeral of Richard Morales, a beloved and respected businessman, had just ended, and the few friends and relatives who remained moved like ghosts through the opulent halls. At the center of this universe of grief stood his 10-year-old daughter, Sophia, a small figure dressed in black, lost in a sea of adults. Her world had collapsed. Her mother had died years earlier, and now her father, her anchor, her everything, was gone too. She felt like the loneliest girl on the planet, at the mercy of the only person she had left, her stepmother, Valeria. Valeria, however, did not share in the mourning. Behind her facade of a grieving widow, her eyes gleamed with cold, calculating greed. She had endured years of a loveless marriage, waiting precisely for this moment. With Richard out of the way, the vast Morales fortune and the mansion were finally hers. Sophia's presence was the last loose end, an annoying reminder of her husband's previous life that she had no intention of keeping. As the last guests said their goodbyes, Valeria grabbed Sophia roughly by the arm and dragged her to the entrance, away from prying eyes. Her voice, a venomous hiss, cut through the air. "This is over, girl. This is my house now." She shoved a small backpack into Sophia's hands. Inside, Sophia found a couple of changes of clothes and her teddy bear. "You are no longer welcome here. Call an orphanage or whoever you want, but I don't ever want to see you again." Tears streamed down Sophia's cheeks as she stared in disbelief at the woman her father had once loved. "But where will I go?" she sobbed. "That's not my problem," Valeria replied coldly, opening the heavy front door and pushing her into the freezing night. "Your father is dead. You have no one now." The cruelty of the act, on the very day of her father's funeral, was overwhelmingly inhuman. Trembling, Sophia found herself alone on the steps of what had been her home her entire life. But just as the door was about to close, a tall, imposing figure blocked it. A man in a dark suit, his expression one of icy fury, stormed into the hall, forcing Valeria to step back. It was Alexander Torres, Richard's best friend and secret business partner, an even more powerful millionaire who had flown in from London for the funeral. He placed a protective arm around Sophia's trembling shoulders and looked at Valeria with utter disdain. "This child isn't going anywhere," he said in a voice that rang like steel. Valeria paled. Alexander continued, and his next words made the greedy widow's world collapse completely. "Perhaps this is your house, ma'am, but Sophia is my daughter." A stunned silence filled the hall. Valeria stammered, "What on earth are you talking about?" Alexander stared at her, savoring her confusion, before delivering the final blow. "Richard named me Sophia's legal guardian and adoptive father in his will. He always feared your greed." He paused, letting his words sink in. "And by the way, as co-owner of 50% of all his companies, I just received a copy of the will. It seems, Valeria, that you will inherit absolutely nothing, except the right to live in this house for the rest of your life. The fortune and the businesses belong to Sophia, and I am her administrator, so in effect, you now work for me." The revelation was brutal, a masterstroke from a man who had loved his friend and would not allow his daughter to suffer another moment. Valeria's humiliation was complete. The news spread like wildfire among the city's elite. The grieving widow was revealed as a disinherited usurper. That very night, Alexander, fulfilling his friend's final wish, took Sophia out of that toxic house and brought her to his own residence, a fortress of warmth and taste that contrasted sharply with the cold opulence of the Morales mansion. For Sophia, the change was overwhelming. She had gone from utter despair to safety, though her little heart remained broken by the loss of her father. She withdrew into a shell of silence. Her only companion, the teddy bear that still smelled like her dad. Alexander Torres, a lifelong bachelor who had never considered having children, now faced the greatest challenge of his life. He had no idea how to comfort a 10-year-old girl who had lost her entire world. At first, he was clumsy. He tried buying her expensive gifts, but Sophia ignored them. He hired the best psychologists, but she hardly spoke. He soon realized that the solution wasn't in his fortune, it was in his heart. So he began to spend every free moment with her, not as a guardian, but as a quiet companion. He started telling her stories about her father, his youthful adventures, his dreams, his silly jokes, slowly, through shared memories. Alexander began to build a bridge into Sophia's wounded heart. Meanwhile, Valeria did not sit idly by. Filled with rage and spite, she hired an army of lawyers to contest the will. She launched a vicious smear campaign in the media, painting Alexander as an opportunist who was exploiting a little orphan girl to steal her inheritance. She accused Richard of having been senile when signing the will, and Alexander of being a manipulator. The legal battle turned into a media circus, and the pressure on Alexander and on Sophia's fragile peace grew unbearable, culminating in a court hearing that would decide the girl's future forever. On the day of the trial, the courtroom was packed with journalists. Valeria's lawyer presented a convincing case, portraying her as a devoted stepmother and the victim of a conspiracy. He painted Alexander as an intruder with no real bond to the child. Valeria herself took the stand and shed crocodile tears, speaking of her deep love for her stepdaughter. For a moment, it seemed as though the scales of justice, so often blind to the truth of the heart, might tilt in her favor. Sophia, seated beside Alexander, clutched his hand tightly, her small body trembling with fear. Alexander's lawyer, a calm and experienced man, waited patiently for the melodrama to end. When it was his turn, he called no witnesses. Instead, he addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, we have one final piece of evidence, a testimony from the only man whose opinion truly matters here, Richard Morales himself." Valeria's attorney immediately objected, but the judge, intrigued, allowed it. A large screen descended into the courtroom, and Richard's kind, smiling face filled it. The video had been recorded just weeks before his sudden death. It was a personal diary, a message to his daughter. Richard, his voice full of love, spoke to Sophia about the future. "My princess," he said, "if you are watching this, it means I am no longer with you. But I want you to know that I have left you in the best hands in the world." He went on to speak about his lifelong friendship with Alexander and his absolute trust in him. "He is the brother I never had, and he will love you as if you were his own daughter. He will protect you, especially from Valeria's ambition. I know she does not love you, my dear, and my greatest fear is leaving you with her." The words, spoken from beyond the grave, were devastating. The video continued with Richard explaining in detail his reasons for leaving both guardianship and control of his fortune to Alexander, exposing his awareness of Valeria's true nature. He ended with a direct message to Sophia, his eyes brimming with tears. "Live a happy life, my love. Laugh, learn, love, and know this. Even if you cannot see me, I will always, always be proud of you." When the screen went dark, there wasn't a single dry eye in the courtroom, except Valeria's whose face was a mask of hatred and defeat. Richard's testimony was irrefutable. The judge immediately delivered his verdict, upholding every point of the will and granting permanent guardianship to Alexander. He dismissed Valeria's case with harsh words, condemning her evident attempt to manipulate the court and her cruelty toward the child. The battle was over. Alexander and Sophia walked out of the courthouse, not into an uncertain future, but into the beginning of their life as a new family, finally free from the shadows of the past. The truth of a good man had triumphed, protecting his daughter even after death. Valeria's downfall was as swift as it was spectacular. Stripped of the fortune she had coveted so desperately and exposed as a fraud, high society turned its back on her. She was forced to live off a small pension Richard had left her out of pity, a mere shadow of the queen she had pretended to be. Her name became synonymous with greed and cruelty. For Alexander and Sophia, however, the future was bright. The courtroom ordeal, though painful, had bound them together in a deep and unbreakable way. In the months that followed, their bond blossomed. Alexander discovered the joy of being a father, attending school meetings, helping with homework, and learning, with comical results at first, how to braid Sophia's hair. Sophia, finally feeling safe and loved for the first time since her father's death, returned to being the cheerful and curious girl she was meant to be. Alexander's once quiet and orderly home, filled with laughter, art projects, and the sound of a piano, an instrument Sophia began to play, bringing warmth to every corner. Together, they decided to honor Richard's memory in the best way possible. Instead of simply managing the fortune, they created the Richard Morales Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to helping orphaned children by providing them with safe homes, education, and the kind of support Alexander had given Sophia. They transformed their pain into purpose, ensuring that Richard's legacy of kindness multiplied and touched countless lives. A year after the funeral, the story reached its most beautiful chapter. Alexander and Sophia stood together at the inauguration of the Foundation's first foster home. Now 11 years old, confident and eloquent, Sophia cut the ribbon at the ceremony. She was no longer a victim, but a symbol of resilience and hope. Alexander looked at her with pride that was purely paternal. The little girl who had once been thrown out of her home on the darkest night of her life had not only found a new home, she had become a beacon of hope for others. The millionaire who had burst into her life had not only saved her, she had saved him too, teaching him that the greatest inheritance a man can leave is not his fortune, but the love that endures in the hearts he touches. Do you believe in family bonds that go beyond blood? Leave a heart if you believe goodness always finds a way to triumph. And remember, a father's love never dies.